Welcome to today's episode of the Capstone Conversation. I'm your host, Jared Asch, and today we're going to be talking to a city that is innovating in technology, and they are proud of it. We're going to learn how you can best work with a city and approach them if you're a startup or a large-scale tech company. How are they looking to purchase things? How are they looking to innovate to solve their problems? So today we have three guests from the city of San Rafael in Marin County, California. The first one is Vedika Ahuja, Tessa Rudnick, and Sean Mooney, who are all joining us. Who would like to introduce themselves first and tell us what is your role with the city and some background?
All right, I'm the one unmuted, so I'll go first. My name is Tessa Rudnick. I'm the Enterprise Applications Manager for the City of San Rafael, and I've worked in local government technology. I've been saying 16 years for a little bit, so we'll stick with that number. I've previously worked for the City of Berkeley. I worked for City and County of San Francisco, and I've been with San Rafael for nearly 3 years. And I also recently finished a term on the El Cerrito City Council. I'm a former mayor and council member. So I have this unique lens of having worked in the government technology space, specifically local government, and being in a local elected official as well. I'll pass it to Sean Mooney.
Hey, how's it going? Sean Mooney. I'm the Director of Digital Service and Open Government here at the City of San Rafael. We have a fantastic team of contributors and a wide variety of work that we do here at the city, based in 4 focus areas, primarily supporting civic engagement across the city, digital transformation, data and insights, as well as IT operations and maintenance. We work with a managed service provider to do our IT work, nuts and bolts. And then that allows for our team to lean on innovation, supporting our data program, digital transformation and process improvement, as well as civic engagement across the strategy across the city. And I'm going to popcorn it over to Vedika.
Thanks. My name is Vedika Ahuja. I'm a product manager of data and insights on the digital services team. I do 3 things for the city. The first is help construct and manage the data infrastructure of the city, including GIS data. I also help as a kind of an internal consultant data analyst for different departments, helping departments get their data, understand it, and use it to improve operations. And then on a strategic level, I'm helping the city more broadly on strategic planning and performance management.
Great. And all of those are fancy titles and good job descriptions. But what you have is when I'm talking to other cities, they're talking about slow rolling technology, not piloting new things. These are 3 people in a city that is embracing technology and trying to innovate. So let's first talk about that. What are your technology priorities in San Rafael, and how are they trying to solve problems for your community?
I'll start and then maybe I'll pass it on to Tessa. So a lot of other cities, we have a lot of software that is end of life. It's taken a long time to make those changes. While we are innovating in small spaces, we're also currently in the middle of replacing an an aging ERP system, an aging permit management system, while at the same time looking at small ways that we can support cities or departments across the city to innovate. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to get into it, but it's a striking that balance between kind of major change management challenges with updating these aging systems and then looking at small ways that we can help support innovation and improvement across the city, with whether they're piloting small tools to support, like a great example is parking abatement, paper-based processes that we can just pilot a small innovative tool for teams, or looking at procuring other platforms. Tessa, do you want to add to that?
One of our biggest strengths is also one of our biggest challenges, which is we have a very large appetite for innovation. However, we are a smaller city and our budget reflects that. So for us, it's about trying to find that balance of addressing the core needs of what we really do need to replace, and then recognizing what is the need to have versus the nice to have and making strategic decisions. We're very fortunate in that our leadership, both from the city manager and the mayor and council, is supportive of our very innovative approach to technology. However, we can't always do all the projects that we want to do. And we have to temper a lot of the expectations of our fellow staff of what we can and can't do. Also, that change management piece around, we still have staff who might not embrace new technologies in the same way as other staff, and we need to be mindful that we're using a very human-centered approach, as well as adopting technologies that the community will really understand, appreciate, and be able to utilize.
You want to add anything?
No, I think that covers it. From a data perspective, I think one thing to really keep in mind is like the priority is to have high quality data that is accessible and that folks can use in their day-to-day. And often I think in bigger cities that involves very technical solutions, data warehouses, data lakes. That's overkill for the size of our city, for the needs of the user, and for the amount of people that are actually working with the data on the back end. From a data perspective, it's really about what users need to make it easy for them to use high quality data on a day-to-day basis.
And when you're talking users, you're talking about other city staff, public works.
Primarily that, but we also have an open data portal, so we're also sharing public data, and we share data through PRA requests as well. My primary clients, I guess, are internal staff, but we're also working on sharing data with residents and stakeholders.
And so when you share stuff with residents, what type of data do you want to share and how best do you communicate that?
So on our open data portal, we're sharing data that is public, that we do get requests often from residents, from contractors, a lot of GIS data, our boundaries, where our capital improvement projects are happening, our zoning information, and then also information about service requests and which requests are open and how we're responding to them. We decide on which data to share based on requests that are coming in to different departments, and also just information that's public and easy to share, easy to put online.
There's a lot of cities that I've spoken to that have expressed concerns with sharing their data and making it public. They like to keep things close to the vest. Any insight to why they would do that and what are the benefits of sharing it?
I think it really depends on what the data is. The data we're putting on the open data portal, it's public anyway, and we're getting requests on a weekly basis or monthly basis to have the boundary information, the service request information, which we would just send out in files to folks. So it's easier to put online. It's more efficient and effective to just make it publicly available. But we have a process that determines which data sets we'll put online for security reasons. I imagine that's primarily security is why folks would, and not wanting to put out PII data is what most cities, I imagine, are trying to avoid.
Yeah, I think that our title is 2019. It was when our department was created, Digital Service and Open Government, and it came from a place of ideal and vision and a hope for transparency. And I think that there's a big push and pull within local government, with any type of government, to balance this idea of transparency. And I think that it's attracted a number of people who are very mission driven within our team to be transparent, and yet at the same time you have to balance that with what is politically expedient. There's right now, especially when we're trying to reframe the goals and objectives process here at the city of San Rafael, and we're trying to push with data and metrics to measure our effectiveness. And when you look at what that means to people within the city council and the districts, there's a tendency to be cautious about setting targets. Here in the city of San Rafael, it's not as big of an issue, but if you think about like larger cities in particular, to say, hey, we're going to place a metric that shows how effective the city council has been, and we're going to be very transparent on the data and the impact we've been able to do, all of a sudden that becomes a political liability. Overall, looking at the data in that context, it hinders that true transparency. But I think to Vedika's point, a lot of what we're doing is potentially available for the public record, and we already have people asking for it. So we're trying to at least make those things available that otherwise they could be asking for, and ideally reduce the impact on staff to try to spend time finding that information for folks.
Yeah, and I'll just add to piggyback off of Sean. We've spent a lot of time and effort in the last couple of years putting up this performance measurement program, picking metrics that really show the progress, or in some cases, not as much progress the city is making towards our goals and objectives that we've created. And I do think that is really a commitment to open government and transparency that not all cities have made.
I've talked from an economic development side to a number of cities to show, like, do a scorecard. How long does it take you to get a permit? How long does it take you to get a phone call back from staff when somebody wants to know, hey, we want to bring this business to your city? How does it work? What's the permit process like? And they're all scared of that. But I'm like, okay, you're scared if you know you're not doing so well. So look at how do you use those. I guess what I'm saying there is I'm complimenting you guys for putting those metrics out there, for grading yourselves in some way and all of that. I want to come back to these internal stakeholders. How do you determine what is the biggest need? Do you have any examples like that you could walk us through?
Yes, I'll let you start.
Sure. I've been exposed over my career to instances where, especially people higher up in the organization, will come and say, I really like this one specific software, or I think we really need to resolve this one issue. Let's do it. And then the priorities will shift in that direction. And sometimes that's successful and other times it's not. And I think what's really important, especially with how our department is positioned in the larger organization, is we really do try to think about what is good for. We can't even say good for all is the ideal. Good for most is a really important goal, but really thinking about, we have to keep the basics. We have to win on the basics. Therefore, we're not doing our jobs. But as we're getting closer, especially as new technologies are becoming more accessible to cities of our size, we really need to think about what is the largest impact for the community and for staff. We try to find things to say yes to. And on the flip side, we need to make sure that we're also saying yes strategically to the right thing, so that we're either making a process more efficient, or we're being more transparent, or we are finding ways to create better balance so that a lot of our staff have the day-to-day things they must do, but then there's the kind of larger overarching, if I'm able to dedicate more of my time to this one specific task, there's so much more I can get done. So it's really about finding that balance.
So we've structured over the last few years, we've refined the operational structure of our department to both support the strategic work that has been outlined within the beginning of the year that's supported by our budget, and then catching what typically used to be the shoulder tapping. And so we've built a process where we're able to make progress within our work plan and outline, hey, these are the things that have been budgeted. These are the major projects, trying to stick to that, and then reinforce the fact that if there's not money allocated for this, we can't do it unless you have funds to do it. But we have a strong work planning process. Excuse me. And then we have a process where we're triaging these incoming requests. Twice a week, we do a triage. We have a tool that allows us to capture those incoming requests, and then we're being able to catch them and then follow up with folks. And there's occasions when things can be addressed easily. Sometimes there's an innovation idea that turns into a larger project, but then the balance ends up becoming, is this something that we need to actually procure a tool for? Because a lot of people, to Tessa's point, are leading with a solution. I want to get this tool. And so then we have this process that allows us to then dig deeper. Okay, what problem are you actually trying to solve? And so let's dig into that and then see what do we already have access to that we can potentially solve for you. And balancing that, and I think this is something we've talked with a lot on our team, we're all eager to help solve problems. We're all eager to support the community and support our teams. And there's a balance though also within the joy of creation. It's like really fun to build something and do something, but then how sustainable is that to like sustain in the long run? Like we could all be building widgets and doing really cool things to solve problems, but then looking down the line, if someone becomes super dependent on that and it requires a lot of staff work to upkeep, or you have a hero who leaves the organization and no longer can support that, we're mindful of like how much we can create versus how much we need to procure.
So I think there was a couple things that I took away from that. Right. Somebody says, okay, yes, this cool technology, I want to try this. You're asking yourself, what is the problem you want to solve? I think that's important. Talk more about how you approach one of those people with, okay, how do you dive in and say, okay, what is this problem? What do you need to solve? Talk us through like something there if you can, a little bit more, Sean or Tessa.
In San Rafael, we have a very multilingual community. It's a very high percentage of Spanish speaking or exclusively Spanish speaking. So one of the challenges that we have is around translation services and how we're making sure that our tools and that our public meetings are accessible. So one of the things that we're thinking of is what are the tools that we can use and how can we utilize cutting edge artificial intelligence to incorporate into our meeting so that we can have better translations. And that's a project that we're working on right now, hoping to pilot very shortly. So that would be a great example of a place where we're getting a shoulder tap, but it is something that on the large scheme of things is a little bit more accessible than, oh, let's hire more translators, which again, the value of translators is incredibly high because if you are a proficient translator, you have the ability to do that. We unfortunately don't have the budget to replicate that for every single meeting, every single time. So trying to adopt a technology that could step in and help us and support us in that way, we're excited to do.
That's a good example too, where technology could be a budget savings, right? So not only are you offering, maybe before you were translating it to from English to Spanish and Mandarin, but now you could put it in 8 or 9 different languages or 30 different languages.
Taking a bird's eye view completely. It's a bird's eye view. And how is it that we can, it's not just about wording what is technology and keeping it with us. It's partnering and working with all the different departments that are using technology. So in this case, city manager's office, city clerk's office, how can we make sure that we are partnering them in that kind of consultant way, working with them to make sure that they're able to be successful with their tools? And then that doesn't necessarily mean it coming from just the IT side of the house, both budgetary and staffing.
Sean? What? Can't hear you, Sean.
You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Well,
I think that's important. And I remember with renewable and energy efficiency, one of the biggest problems some cities had talked about, and this goes back 10 or 15 years, when a lot of cities were replacing their HVAC systems and upgrading to more efficient ones, adding solar panels, changing over lights. They're like, it costs money to change out those lights and I don't have that in my budget. But you save 75% of your costs on all your lighting in your building. So wouldn't that pay for it? And they were like, yeah, but I don't pay that bill from my sustainability department. And it's interesting. And then I remember somebody, I think it was in the city of North Las Vegas, that said, hey, what about the concept of if you save it, you get 50% of it back to your budget, right? Or something like that. And I liked what Tessa, you were saying is you're pulling money from departments like, hey, we could do this translation service. How can we help with this?
exactly.
We'll see.
Really well.
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Excellent. I'll let Vedika and Tessa jump on that.
I worked on a project a few years ago where it was transitioning regular classic. It's funny to talk about now just because of what's happening with copper wires and a lot of AT&T moving away from that physical infrastructure of telephone. But 13 years ago, worked on a project that was transitioning to VoIP. And it was very challenging to convince folks in the kind of local government space that it's worthwhile to, instead of paying X amount of specific landlines, to move to VoIP, because that cost savings over time is significant. And what's funny about you using the example around energy efficiency, our leadership in San Rafael is very cutting edge and wanting to embrace better sustainability-minded things, and are able to see the vision of some of these investments that we make will pay off more in the long run. That is a part of the calculus for what kinds of technologies we're looking at.
Yeah. I want to take a different side. We talked about like the internal user. I get tech companies as somebody who helps tech companies sell into state and local government in the Bay Area, but also around the country. A lot of companies will come to me with the greatest idea ever and say, "Oh, we should get cities to do this." It may be the greatest idea ever, but it might not be something the city needs now, or it might not fit into their timeline. What are your thoughts? How should a company, especially with new technology, best approach a city? How can they start a conversation? How do they understand what your needs are, and how does their product fit into their needs?
The word that you said that I jumped on in my mind immediately was idea, that they have this amazing idea. We love ideas too. However, with being a smaller city, we have a more limited budget, so we can't make investments simply based on good ideas. We really need to make investments on things that are proven to work. And it's important, and I'm not saying this in a way to scare off people who have these really good ideas of how they could make government, specifically local government, be able to operate more efficiently, or they have that secret sauce, that little extra that would make a huge difference for our operations. We're really excited about that. But especially if you don't have any other local government clients, it's very hard for us to actually make a financial investment in a product that we deem to be unproven because they don't have examples of use cases of where this works in peer agencies. But because we are a really innovative-minded city, and I think we have some examples in our history, and we're certain open to it for the future, is if companies, especially who have those good ideas, want to partner with us, or if we can figure out a way to structure so that we can really workshop these ideas that you have in a real-world case, mid-sized city. The challenge is, again, making a financial investment in something that is potentially unproven.
And now I'd like to hop onto that because we get a lot of cold calls, and the process that we're going through right now that Vedika has been leading us through at the city is this reframing of our goals and objectives for the next 3 years. And I think that when you get a cold call from somebody, "Hey, I've got this great thing, you should really check it out," it's not often in alignment with what our actual goals and objectives are as a city. So I would encourage software engineers and companies that are looking to broaden their reach and look in the market to see what our cities wanting to do, because our goals and objectives often inform our budget. If you don't have money to pay for something, it doesn't matter how cool it is, you're not going to be able to do it. And if you don't have the political support to get it done and over the finish line, especially if there's a cost, then you're not going to get somebody. So at the end of the day, we can think something is really cool, but if it's going to be a one-time cost of $30,000 to $40,000 a year and an ongoing cost of $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and it doesn't align with the city council's goals and objectives, or the city manager or the mayor, then it's really just a shot in the dark. And so I think from a strategy perspective, I would really encourage these startups to start and see, like, how does the product they're developing actually align with the things that people are trying to do? Instead of just cold calling any city, try to find the alignment with the product they're offering and the actual goals, because then you have that political support to actually get it over the finish line.
Hey, I see you're prioritizing this. How are you trying to prioritize that? Have you thought about this?
And it certainly does help when you have leadership championing a certain either product or a service that needs to be supported. It does help because it, again, ultimately these decisions come back to the budget. And so leaders have decision-making support, but a lot of it has to do with the city manager. When I was a mayor, I would get cold calls from software companies, which is funny because and I work in this space as well, as my day job. But it's important that when these companies are coming to, let's say, an elected official, a mayor, a council member, and saying, hey, I have this great thing, they can be really excited about it. But ultimately, it's the city manager and it's the budget process that we really need to think through. So just because you have the ear of a mayor doesn't necessarily mean that it is now a slam dunk and you will be able to get a contract with that specific city.
I think that's important. And when you get approached from these companies, Sean, you mentioned you get approached a whole bunch, and Tessa, you too. What's the best part of that conversation? You talked about studying priorities. I was on something last night or last week at a webinar, and somebody in procurement was saying, stop asking me what my pain point is. Know my pain point. What do you want these companies? What is the approach? Is it, I've learned your priorities. How are you working towards that? How do they get to meet the city manager and the IT director other than engage somebody like me? Sorry, shameless self-plug.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually understanding the city is helpful. To Tessa's point, there is definitely merit in presenting at these conferences, and the mayor and the city manager comes back from the conference like, hey, there's this great tool, like we should get it. And so I think that there is definitely merit there as far as going straight to the top that can be effective. But I think, as I said earlier, understanding where our needs are and having those proven cases within government that show where there's been actual success is going to have some impact. To be honest, though, like I get so many calls and we get some bombarded so often that it can be a turnoff. So I think it's really a tricky space, I feel, for developers who have some really great ideas. And the other side of it is that we've also been burned in the past with startups where we have made the investment in the past and then they've been purchased by somebody else and then shut down. And then we've been moved into another. They've been purchased by, I'm not going to name any names, but like a large national civic company purchases it and then they absorb it and then shut down and then you push it to something else. The startup, there's a lot of risk in going to that startup space. And I think that government is typically pretty risk averse. So having a proven track record really helps, or slotting in so that the price point is right. The other side of it too, and I want to give Vedika a chance to chime in because we've had this conversation about how, if we do see something, how do we somehow shoehorn that into the priority process, which is the other side of it. And I don't know, Vedika, without naming names, maybe you can talk about what that looks like when we see something we like, but we didn't priority.
Yeah, I think we have seen things we like, and often it happens at conferences. And I think this happens in the data space often, where a lot of the data products are the end users are internal staff, provide excellent service. I think every city is trying to provide excellent service. So if that's also something that a product can prove that they have done in other cities, that goes a long way. I think with data products, the end users, the staff, and then to use that information to provide excellent service takes many steps. And I think it becomes harder to sell as a top priority because you're not seeing we get this product and necessarily we're going to have an amazing website because of it, or we're going to improve, or we're going to fix potholes more quickly because of it. And so I think there's some internal marketing that we often have to do. And then sometimes it doesn't align with what the city is looking for in the moment.
So let's follow through with an example.
Can I add
one for your city? But let's say the priority of the city is more policing, public safety, things like that. Somebody comes in and says, though, I've heard you have this translation problem and I can save you money. Is it a lost cause because it's not in that public safety element, or is it still, how does that fit into that priority section that you're talking about, Vedika?
I think of translation as fitting into providing excellent service. And I think there's a band of services that no matter what our priorities are, cities are going to be interested in doing, responding to phone calls, emails, complaints, providing efficient public meetings. Yeah, there's just like the basic operational things that cities do that I think if products can show they can improve the service, they can provide it more efficiently and more cost effectively, more equitably maybe, then they're there could be interest from us and from cities.
So for these specific companies, I think what's really important message and takeaway is there should be this kind of yin-yang balance of them offering a really great product, and that's important. The other part of that balance is them understanding the culture of how local government operates, how change management happens at the local level, how training can best be supported, and those soft skills and the development of those soft skills in addition to having a really great product. And there's often times where those things can be out of balance, where you can have a really amazing product, but you don't have the kind of soft skills and support that would encourage a partnership and that long-term relationship. Because also the other piece, we were talking about it earlier today, funny enough, is that it is easier to convince, like, on a budgetary perspective, one-time costs are a lot easier than ongoing costs, because ongoing costs add to a budget load. And as we're approaching a lot more economic uncertainty, if you're just giving a SaaS product and that is what you offer, there's a lot more risk of that potentially no longer being your customer if we don't feel that it is a product that is providing the return on investment of this product, or it doesn't become integral to our operations. That would probably be one of the first to go, versus sometimes there might be budget for a one-time cost, so you're able to get that at that moment.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because every software company is moving in the direction of that SaaS model. They want the monthly revenue. So I hear that. When we're talking about this budget stuff, I've had some clients, particularly in the startup space, where I'm like, hey, this is a good idea. I might know a fit for you. Why not give it to the first 3 cities that take you up on this to experiment that? Is that something you guys would consider? Would you pilot a program for free if you see a need for it?
I think that it all comes down to capacity. And that is a big thing that we've been talking about, whether it's the capacity to take that on at a moment, if it's solving a problem we're trying to solve right now. And if rolling that out involves the major change management across the organization, what is the organization's capacity for that change? And that's something that we're talking about. Like there's lots of really great ideas. Everyone wants to implement everything at once, but we can't just training alone. We have a community here at the city that is ready to innovate. And at the same time, if you're in a constant state of innovation, then you don't have anything firm to land on. I think that post COVID-19, one of the realities that our organization has faced is this rapid turnover, right? And I don't think this is unique to the city of San Rafael. What happens if you have like that old guard that's left that was kind of paper, and that was the way we did things. That's how we did things. And now you have folks coming in ready to innovate, ready to do new things, ready to reimagine how we do it. But you can only reimagine so many things at once. And so I think that is a reality that we're coming up against, is really facing like, what is our capacity to change? How do we, as much as we want to do this quickly, how do we do as much as we possibly can? So even if it's free, which, just getting back to that question, it has to still align with what problems are we trying to solve right now? And how does that fit in? And is it something that everyone's going to need to pick up, or is it something that just a couple of people can do? And so it's less of an impact to the overall organization, and it's really just going to help people in a niche spot.
Tessa, it looked like you wanted to add something.
Well, it's a lot like an intern in the sense that you every once in a while get that rare intern that just completely adds value, and they come to you and it's just this plug and play perfection. But a lot of the time with interns, it requires work. You can't just get labor from an intern, because a part of it is that mentorship and that guidance. So you're working at a certain pace. And it would be like that a lot of times if we were working with a brand new startup that has this great idea and want to use our city as a test lab. One thing I'd really think about is depending on that specific service, we use the example earlier, parking services. If there was a company that partnered just with parking services, it's a kind of discrete way of it not impacting an entire organization, and parking services would have the bandwidth for. That's a really great synergy. But if it's something that would impact the staff across the board at every level, that would be one that we'd have to take a little bit of pause and really understand what those greater impacts would be.
And let's dive in on that. On traffic management is another sort of business model. I've seen people in that space say, hey, we'll do this for free for you and make the investment, and it's going to be a revenue share. So if you make more money with parking, we get 30% of the more revenue we make the city, whatever the number is. And the same thing in energy efficiency. The ESCO companies had come along for a while, the Honeywells, the Amerescos, the Johnson Controls, and said, hey, we'll do those light bulbs for you. And based on the savings, we'll take a portion of that to pay back what we put in for you. What do you think about software models like that? How do you judge something like that?
That I would say that's a winner in my mind. If it's going to save time, we had an issue a few years ago with the way that we were tracking false alarms, the way that we were doing it. There's a tool that somebody many years ago had built. It was a database, and it was one of those, the example I provided earlier. Somebody in IT built this database and they were using it to track, and it was held together by toothpicks and tape and bubble gum. And it was overall a big issue for the police department in tracking false alarms. They're finding that actually there was a larger amount of staff time about maintaining the database and the impacts overall of then running collections on the fees for false alarms. And we looked into that vendor space and we found a vendor that said, hey, we'll take care of the whole thing for you. We'll send the letters, we'll track it, we'll do the collections, everything like that. We're just going to take it off the top. And so it was a no-brainer for us because we had a need that we were trying to solve. And then the tool and the service came in and it was just a huge relief. So I think that's definitely a winning model if there's more companies looking to solve that.
Vedika, I got it wrong. Vedika, hurry. I'll edit that. Vedika, I want to circle back to this priorities and how you address them. And I'll follow through on that public safety example I was talking about earlier. Public safety could be a priority for a city. And you could read when you're reading online about what a city's priorities are, what the council's focused on. I'll just follow through with this example. And it's focused on, okay, public safety here, and there's an increased budget for it. It's law enforcement. It's driving down X crime, retail theft, and pickpocketing and things like that. Well, I have 18 solutions that could fit into that. I don't have 18 clients in that space, but it could be one company or it could be 18 different companies. How do they talk to you? How do you narrow down something like that? Because you're talking about license plate readers, you're talking about early detection drones, you're talking gunshot sensors. There's so many different things. Help us understand how you would analyze what could be a priority for the city.
That's a big question. And I think the police department would analyze this. From my perspective, I think the software companies that are going to have the best chance of getting it in with the city are the ones that are low-hanging fruits. As Sean said, they have it's a $10,000 solution that will decrease crime, whether it's fixing street light or automatic street lights or something that's, I think those are the type of solutions that we can move more quickly. License plate, that's a big process that's going to involve council. It's going to involve, a lot of discussion in the city. Not to say that we're not going to do it, but I think the low hanging fruit have the best in. I don't know, Sean and Tessa, if you have more to add on that.
Actually, I think that was a good answer to that. It gets people thinking, right? Sometimes it's about getting in the door and solving a specific problem and showing your value as a company. Right? To solve, hey, I can solve this problem. And I've heard that from all three of you in a different way. Anything I haven't asked that I should be asking? Anything stand out to any of you?
That's a good question. I think having colleagues and friends who try to get into this space, I've had a friend who is trying to get something off the ground. Like, how do I do this? How do I do this? It's a really tough nut to crack. Every organization is different. Every personality who's answering the phone or responding to the email is going to be different. And I really have to say that I don't envy the folks trying to break into the space, especially if you're trying to create something new. and can know that you get a lot of no's, you get a lot of ignored calls, and you got a lot of angry people, maybe just because they're sick of hearing about something. And I would hate to ever discourage folks trying to go into this space, because I think there's some really great opportunities out there that we still don't even know, with emerging technologies and artificial intelligence. Even civic tech leaders within the government space who are working in government still don't really know the full extent of the possibilities of what we're going to be able to do in the near future. And so I think that just having a word of encouragement for these teams that are trying to come up with innovative solutions, and just also encouraging them to like really lead with empathy, with an understanding of what are the city's problems. Do your research, go deeper rather than just scraping the surface and understanding that.
Two brief bits of advice. The first one is understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect of the more that you learn, the more you realize you have so much more to learn. Your most experienced city manager will tell you that they still have so much to learn. We want people who are curious, who are humble, or the products and people, because these are two things that really tie into with each other. We want to have people who are not coming to us saying they're experts, but that they really want to learn from us and partner with us. And then that second piece is never discounting the long-term relationships. A lot of this is relationship building and making sure that you can be a trusted partner for local governments, because those are who we talk to our peers about. If there is something, a product or service that is very trusted, and that these people are lead with empathy, as Sean said, these are the kinds of folks, either with products, people, services, any of those things, that are successful and gain traction in this space.
Yeah. And to add to that, I would say the products and the presentations that have had the most impact on me are often products that partner with cities or partner with municipalities and show us the impact that they have been able to have. And so when I can see that, and then I can reach out to that city or that IT department to understand more of the impact that it's had, I'm more likely to be sold or more likely to be bought into that product.
You know, what I heard from all three of you there in one word is relationship. And talking through the city, you talked about empathy, but you also talked about listening to their problems and helping them solve that. And it's funny, I was talking to somebody recently and they're like, I could do what you're talking about by building an AI email list for all the IT professionals at all these cities across the state. And then I could have AI send them 5 emails until they respond, and that'll drum up phone calls for me. And I was like, okay, those are the people who Sean's gonna delete in his inbox, that you want somebody who's gonna listen to your needs.
Yeah, I'm going to say you can tell the cold emails that are like just some sort of mass email, and there's usually a click here to unsubscribe. My name has been thrown into some sort of register, churned out, and yeah, it just ignored. I think finding that balance between doing your job as a salesperson and trying to build a relationship and not being so forceful, it's a tough space. And I think that there's a delicate dance for those who are really successful at doing it, in both building the relationships and not being too aggressive. And as I said, it's like a lot of it is personality. It's you're courting somebody, and understanding what that person you're trying to sell to, what their organization's personality is, what the individual's personality is. I think there's some people who are just very good at this. And I think leaning on technology to just do mass and run the numbers, like, sure, I guess that's going to be effective at a certain thing. If you ask 1,000 people on a date, maybe you get one date, right? But I think that what kind of organization are you leading? Like, what kind of reputation are you trying to build for your product?
I think that's a great way to end, and it looped everything back together. So thank you to the awesome staff at the city of San Rafael for being a technology leader. You are a small city, but sometimes you are leading in innovation, and you are doing so much more and more nimble and flexible and accessible than some of the big cities. I really appreciate the three of you taking the time out of your busy day and doing this episode and joining me. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks.
Take care.